For more than 20 years, the case of Army Private Amanda Gonzales, who was only 19 and pregnant when she was found strangled in her barracks on November 3, 2001, has remained unsolved. Despite efforts to find her killer, the trail had gone cold for many years. During the Cold War, Hanau, Germany was developed into a significant United States Army Aviation Center, referred to as Fliegerhorst Army Airfield. In 1952, various construction ventures were initiated to re-establish the airfield's military identity. These initiatives included the construction of barracks, hangars, administrative buildings, and other facilities necessary to support the military personnel and their aircraft. As a result, Hanau became an essential facility for the U.S. military during the Cold War. Amanda was born on December 8, 1981, in Hearne, Robertson County, Texas, to her parents, Gloria and Santos Gonzales. Unfortunately, their parents separated when she was still young. Yet, Amanda wasn't deprived of fatherly love in her life. Her mother, Gloria, met a man and got married to him. From 1986, when she was just 5 years old, she lived with her stepfather, Michael Bates. Amanda spent her formative years in Madisonville, Texas, excelled academically throughout high school, and harbored a passion for becoming a pediatric physical therapist. Private Gonzales possessed a desire to explore the world. Hence, when the chance to enlist in the Army and serve in Europe after she graduated Madisonville High School in 2000 came up, Amanda seized it without hesitation. "I'm in," Gloria recollected her daughter saying. In March 2001, Amanda was deployed to Germany. In the picturesque German town of Fliegerhorst, where the sounds of military drills and aircraft filled the air, Amanda Gonzales would spend the following months honing her skills as a cook in the U.S. Army. Away from her home in the Lone Star State of Texas, Amanda felt a sense of excitement and adventure, eager to take on new challenges and opportunities. In November of 2001, which was her first assignment in the Army, Amanda was assigned to Headquarters Supply Company of the 127th Aviation Support Battalion as a cook. Amanda was anxious and happy to tell her mother about her pregnancy, so she picked up the phone and decided to tell her immediately. With a trembling voice, she revealed to her beloved mom that she was expecting a child despite being only 19 years old and on her first assignment in the Army. Despite the shock and unexpected news, Amanda's mother, Gloria Bates, could sense the joy and anticipation in her daughter's voice as she shared her plans to name the child Alicia Marie. As Amanda navigated the challenges of being a young, pregnant soldier in a foreign land, she knew that the love and support of her family back home would be her guiding light. And so, with a heart full of hope and determination, Amanda embraced this new chapter in her life, ready to face whatever lay ahead with courage and resilience. As Miss Bates also mentioned, Private Gonzales made the most of her leisure time by exploring German castles and taking a road trip to Paris with her friend. However, she confided in her cousins that she was a victim of bullying by some female counterparts on the military base who were eager to engage in physical confrontations. Undeterred, Private Gonzales demonstrated remarkable courage and defended herself and others against these bullies. Ms. Bates said that they referred to her as Firecracker because she was always prepared to explode. She added that her daughter was self-reliant and took care of herself, so she believed that she put up a strong resistance. On November 3, 2001, Army Private Amanda Gonzales was just 19 years old and 4 months pregnant. When she did not report for work, which was highly unlike Amanda, soldiers broke down the door to her barracks and found her lifeless body. She had been strangled, and her death was considered a brutal and violent crime. Her death was classified as a homicide caused by suffocation. According to the FBI, she was 4 months pregnant. The investigation into her death likely involved interviews with her colleagues and friends, forensic analysis of the crime scene, and other methods of evidence gathering. However, it appears that none of these efforts were able to lead to a breakthrough in the case, and the trail of her killer went cold. Despite an investigation by military authorities and the civilian police, her killer was not identified, and the case remained unsolved for over 2 decades. This means that the person or persons responsible for her death have remained at large for longer than Amanda Gonzales lived, which is a tragic and sobering realization. The fact that this case remained unsolved for so long is a reminder of the devastating impact that violent crime can have on individuals, families, and communities. It also highlights the challenge that law enforcement agencies face when trying to solve crimes, particularly when evidence is scarce or leads are few and far between. For 20 long years, the family of the victim was left in a state of unrelenting despair and unimaginable agony. The perpetrator of the heinous crime, the culprit who took away the life of an innocent woman, remained free and unpunished, while the loved ones of the victim were left to pick up the shattered pieces of their lives. Despite the unbearable pain and anguish that she was forced to endure, Gloria refused to let the memory of her daughter fade away into obscurity. She valiantly fought to keep the investigation alive, tirelessly seeking justice for her child who was taken away from her far too soon. With unwavering determination, the mother wrote letters to members of Congress, begging them to take action and bring the perpetrator to justice. She even reached out to popular television shows like Dr. Phil and America's Most Wanted, hoping that the wider exposure would help to turn up new leads and bring the killer to justice. But despite all of her efforts, justice remained elusive. The years continued to tick by, and still no one was charged with the crime. It is difficult to imagine the pain and heartbreak that Gloria Bates and her family must have felt, knowing that the person responsible for their loved one's death was still out there, free to live their life without any consequences. The Army commemorated the 10th anniversary of Private Gonzales' death in 2011 by offering a $125,000 reward for information. Army investigators were hoping that the reward would encourage people to come forward with any relevant information that could help solve the case. CID spokesman Chris Gray stated that keeping the reward to $125,000 demonstrated their determination to solve the case and bring the responsible person or persons to justice. He further added that they were confident that someone out there had information regarding the untimely death of the soldier and her unborn child, and that they were not giving up. Gray strongly encouraged anyone with information to contact them immediately. Despite the offered reward, no progress was made in solving the case. It remains unsolved or cold. The FBI allegedly called Gloria 22 years after the murder to inform her that an arrest had finally been made. Unfortunately, the specifics of how police located and arrested the perpetrator have not been made public. Authorities detained 42-year-old former soldier Shannon L. Wilkerson on February 23, 2023 on suspicion of killing Gonzales, they announced. He was later discovered to have been a member of the armed forces during the time of Gonzales' demise. He was discharged from active duty in 2004, just 3 years after Amanda's death. The investigation was being assisted by the Department of the Army Criminal Investigation Division, though privacy regulations prohibit the divulgence of any soldier's discharge characterization. At the time of the murder, Shannon L. Wilkerson would have been 21 years old, and according to the Andalusia Star News, he hails from Andalusia, Alabama. As per the news outlet, the individual was operating a fitness center named Cardio Zone in the region back in 2015. Wilkerson was charged under the Military Extraterritorial Jurisdiction Act, which gave the U.S. federal courts jurisdiction over crimes committed by the United States by, among others, former members of the armed forces who were no longer subject to the Uniform Code of Military Justice. Wilkerson was charged with 1 count of first-degree murder, and if he was convicted, he faced a maximum penalty of life in prison. According to court documents, the defendant entered a plea of not guilty during a hearing held after his arrest on February 23, 2023. It has been reported that a trial date has been scheduled for March 27, 2023 in Pensacola, Florida. Ms. Bates, the mother of Amanda Gonzales, has been informed by investigators that DNA evidence is being examined in the case, although it is unclear whether DNA evidence has linked Mr. Wilkerson to the crime. She plans to attend Mr. Wilkinson's detention hearing in the U.S. District Court for the Northern District of Florida, which is scheduled to take place in March. As the investigation into the untimely demise of the victim continues, the diligent efforts of the Federal Bureau of Investigation remain steadfast. Despite their tireless work, the motive behind the gruesome killing remains shrouded in mystery, leaving the authorities unable to provide any conclusive details at this time. However, the seasoned professionals at the FBI refuse to relent and are leaving no stone unturned in their pursuit of justice for the victim and closure for their loved ones. On March 14, 1984, police were horrified when they found a young 27-year-old single mother, Sarah Mobley Hall, and her 10-year-old son, Derek, beaten and strangled to death in their apartment on Ventura Way, North Carolina. Sarah looked after children with special needs, including her own son. After nearly 4 decades of investigation, Sarah and Derek's family received closure in 2023. Who would want to kill Sarah and her young son who had special needs? How did the investigators find the culprit after all these years? Our case today takes us to Charlotte, the most populous city of North Carolina. It is located in the Piedmont region of rolling hills near the southern border of North Carolina. Home to about 874,579 people, it hosts a friendly and vibrant community of people with different cultures. The mild, temperate climate is one of the main reasons why residents decide to call Charlotte their home. Offering a lower-than-average cost of living, Charlotte has something to offer to everyone, whether they are looking to raise a family, start a business venture, or just enjoy quality living. With its politically progressive and culturally rich community, Charlotte houses a large population of different ethnicities. Residents often like to refer to Charlotte as the beautiful city due to its magnificent natural beauty, abundant parks, and a stunning nightlife. Unfortunately, one fine spring day in 1984, something happened in this charming city that tarnished its beauty for almost 40 years to follow. Born to Mary Walker Mobley on May 1, 1956, Sarah Mobley Hall experienced a great loss in her childhood when her mother passed away after birthing Sarah's sister, Mary Ann Mobley, in 1958. After that, Sarah developed strong maternal instincts, and she decided to dedicate a major part of her life to helping others. Although they were raised by their grandmother, after their mother's demise, Sarah played a crucial role in the upbringing of her sister Mary. Once she became an adult, Sarah worked as an educator's aide at St. Mark's School for the Handicapped. She had an amicable and gentle nature and was well liked by everyone at her workplace and in her family. Then, on September 3, 1973, a son was born to Sarah Mobley Hall and Elvert Hall. Derek Dion Mobley was raised by his mother alone and was a student of Newell Elementary School. Sarah had devoted her life to taking care of her son, who needed special attention, and also other less fortunate kids who needed extra care. Sarah lived with her son on Ventura Way, North Charlotte, near the complex along Reagan Drive, which is now referred to as Somerset Apartments. Both of them were really close to each other. Derek was full of smiles and just as amiable as his mother. He seemed to share a special bond with Sarah. He also shared a friendly relationship with his Aunt Mary, who used to visit them often. Since Sarah was a single mother, her sister used to help them out and spend time with them. No one knew that the young lives of Sarah and Derek would end so soon. March 14, 1984 was a nice spring day, and Charlotte residents were going about their lives as usual. On the same day, a few neighbors noticed a foul smell coming from Sarah's apartment. When they went to inspect the area, they found the door ajar. It raised the alarm for them, and they were quick to inform police about the incident. When the police arrived at the crime scene, they described it as truly horrific. Not only was Sarah, a young lady, and her little child brutally strangulated using a phone cord, but Sarah had also been ruthlessly beaten. The bodies had been rotting for a few days before they were found by the neighbors. The crime scene pictures and the entire environment of their apartment looked deeply appalling. The police contacted Sarah's family to inform them about the brutal killings. Her sister Mary received the information through a phone call. She was completely heartbroken and blamed herself for not being there for her sister and nephew. She informed the police that she used to spend a lot of time with them after college, and she used to work in the area near Sarah's house. The police chief Johnny Jennings and Mecklenburg Sheriff Gary McFadden tried securing all the available evidence, talked to every possible suspect, and investigated the neighborhood thoroughly, but nothing of substance could be secured. Initially, the police had a few suspects in mind, but none of them led the police anywhere. In the 80s, the police mostly relied on solid evidence against the culprit. Eyewitnesses, follow-up interrogations, and old-school detective work were the only options available for investigators to find the bad guys. Even after extensive investigation, the case went cold. Though different detectives reopened the case time and again, no new leads could be found. Police Chief Johnny Jennings reopened the case in 1998 and investigated the case further. DNA was a new concept at that time, so after turning over every possible stone, he suspected that the pillowcase found at the crime scene, on which Sarah's body was found to be resting on, could have the DNA of the suspect. Unfortunately, the police database did not hold any matches at the time. Decades would go by, and Sarah and Derek's family still remained oblivious as to who had taken their loved ones from them in such a cruel manner. After almost 39 years, in 2023, technology had seen multi-dimensional development. After almost 40 years, the police gained a new tool in the form of genetic genealogy and DNA testing to provide justice to victims' families. The Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department received a grant from the Bureau of Justice Assistance to allow the use of new DNA technology. In 2023, CMPD Captain Joel McNeely sent some of the DNA found on the pillowcase to Forensics Innovative Labs, a company specializing in forensic genetic genealogy. The report was produced on the basis of records available in commercial databases. It did not lead the police to the killer, but it definitely laid out an easier path for them to tread upon. The report identified a match with a relative of the suspect. Then, they partnered with the FBI to carry out a familial DNA search, making it the first ever case in North Carolina to use a familial DNA technology to solve a murder. This finally revealed that the DNA found on the pillowcase was a direct match to a 61-year-old man named James Thomas Pratt. It seemed that just a year shy of 4 decades after their murder, Sarah and Derek could finally receive justice. James Pratt was born on April 14, 1962. He seemed to have lived a double life. While he was referred to as a good guy by people who knew him, he also had a number of minor misdemeanor reports against him. He was arrested a couple of times between the 1980s and 1990s. Even so, he was not linked with the double homicide of Sarah Mobley and Derek Mobley. The police did not even consider him a suspect in the 1984 case of Sarah and Derek due to them believing he had an insignificant relationship to the case and the victims. People who knew him found the news of his arrest deeply shocking. Glenn Counts, a veteran crime reporter of Channel 9, visited the Fort Mill Motel to discuss the news with the residents. They said that he was the guy who made sure that kids got in from school okay. James had also informed another resident that he was a church-going man. He was employed as a handyman in North Carolina for about 2 years. The residents stated that he was a good person who helped them with the installation of car batteries or checking on the kids. But there was a dark side to this good church-going man. His criminal history covered almost 2 decades. In 1982, he had a drug charge against him. Not long after it finally dusted off, in 1987, he was charged with a car break-in. Just a few years later, he was called in for assault and battery in 1991. It had hardly been a year before he was arrested for an assault on a female. This time, a decade went by until he was arrested for another assault case. These charges did not stay for a long time, as they were quickly disposed of. But after almost 40 years, a solid case has been built against him. At the time of the murders of Sarah and Derek, James Pratt was 22 years old and lived in the neighborhood. What's more surprising, he was even friendly with them. So, although the motive had not been identified, he was definitely the one who murdered a young single mother and her innocent son who had special needs. James Thomas Pratt was staying in a hotel in York County off Highway 21 near Carowinds in South Carolina on February 1, 2023, when the police reached the hotel and arrested him. He was cooperative according to the officers. He has been charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder and no bond has been provided to him. He was extradited and is currently being held at the Mecklenburg jail. The arrest of Pratt was a joint effort by CMPD's Homicide Unit, FBI Charlotte Field Office, CMPD Cold Case Review Team, CMPD Crime Lab, Innovative Forensic Investigations, North Carolina State Crime Laboratory, York County Sheriff's Office, Bureau of Justice Assistance Saki Funding, Parabon Nanolabs, and the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division. After 39 years, everyone had forgotten Sarah and Derek except their family and the police department, who were constantly looking for new leads. These 4 decades would have been enough to make a 61-year-old man believe that he had finally gotten away with murder. Thanks to the advancement in technology, justice has been served. Sarah and Derek's family received the news of Pratt's arrest by showing their gratitude to police for not letting the culprit go. Mary, Sarah's sister, said, "I carried a burden for years because I felt like I should have been with her. All these years, she believed that it would never have happened if she had been with her. She remembered Sarah having a jovial personality and Derek being a friendly child." Mary thanked everyone who helped her and her family find some answers and put this incident behind them. She added that the arrest of James Pratt had brought great relief to her. CMPD Captain Joel McNeely said, "There's a lot of bad people that have done a lot of bad things that are probably a little concerned right now." On 26 June 2001, just a day before her birthday, a 52-year-old Caucasian woman, Karen Moore, left her residence in Davie, Florida at 7 p.m. and would never return home. The next day, her 8-year-old daughter Christina would come home from summer camp for her mother's birthday, but her mother would not be there to pick her up. Thomas Stewart Moore and Olga Charlotte Moore were blessed with a baby girl on 27 June 1948. They named her Karen Elizabeth Moore. She also had a sister named Pam. As she grew up, Karen enjoyed cooking, hiking, sailing, and playing the piano. Karen had a keen interest in traveling since her childhood. Nobody would have predicted that she would travel away one day and never come back. She completed her Associates of Art degree in 1968 and graduated as a Bachelor of Science majoring in nursing in 1979. In 2001, at the age of 53, Karen Elizabeth Moore was going through a divorce with her husband. She had a restraining order against him. They had an 8-year-old daughter together named Christina, who Karen got full custody of. Before she went missing, Karen was employed as a nurse at the Edge Point Estates retirement community in Boca Raton. But even though she worked full-time, she never compromised on providing a quality childhood for Christy. She made sure to give Christina the best years of her life. Christina, too, remembers Karen as a dedicated mother. Despite her job as a nurse, Karen found time to take Christina to the zoo and do other activities with her, simply to spend quality time together. She wanted to ensure a happy and healthy childhood for her daughter. But soon, the happy picture of this family would turn into a sad story filled with a myriad of questions. 27th June 2001 was Karen's 53rd birthday. Christina came back home from her Girl Scout camp to celebrate with her mother, but Karen never came to pick her up. The first suspicion that something was wrong arose when Karen didn't show up. Karen was a nurse, so it was possible that she might have been busy at work. But Karen was always available for her daughter, and if she had work, she would have sent someone else to receive Christina. The fact that no one was there was very strange. As the day passed by, the story got even more mysterious. The previous day, on June 26, around 6:30 in the evening, Karen had paid her neighbor's son for mowing her lawn. That was the last time someone had seen her. She had then taken her white 1999 Saturn and left the house around 7 p.m. No one had any idea why she had left the house or where she could have gone. When she didn't return home, a police complaint was filed by Karen's sister, Pam Kleiss. Pam revealed that Karen had called her estranged husband to pick up Christina before leaving for work in the morning the day she disappeared. Later, she had exchanged a brief interaction with her neighbor's son and then left the house. What happened after these incidents is anyone's guess. She was supposed to work the next day. Keith Krydall was the executive director of the retirement home Edgepoint Estates, where Karen worked as a nurse. He mentioned that Karen had a punctual and responsible working history of 8 years. Karen was so sincere about her work that she would have informed the establishment in case of any urgent endeavor she had. Everyone knew that Christina meant everything to her. There was no doubt that Karen didn't leave voluntarily. Now, was this just a distressing accident, or was something else at play here? With rising suspicions and no real leads, the police had limited resources to find Karen Moore. The first step was to track her vehicle. At the time of her bizarre disappearance, Karen was driving a white 1999 Saturn 4-door with the license plate DOO-THU. Her car also had an Indiana State University decal on the back. This information was distributed to the public with every possible detail. James Franquise, a detective at the Davie Police Department, received a tip from a woman saying she had seen the same car in South Miami-Dade County. But the information could not be verified or backed by any other witnesses. In a frantic effort to take the case forward, the police released a missing poster detailing Karen's physical appearance. The posters read that she had brown eyes, brown hair, and prescription glasses. Her height was listed as 5 feet 4 inches. With no success so far, the police were struggling for leads to find the whereabouts of Karen. The initial inspection of her house was enough of an indicator to anticipate bad news. All her clothing, luggage, and even her cell phone were found at home. A closer look at her house made it evident that there were no signs of forced entry or foul play. The detective suspected that Karen must have left the house voluntarily. However, what caused her to leave was still unclear. Franquise informed the public that the police were looking into the financial and telephone records of Karen Moore. The possibility of theft or robbery was immediately shunned when her bank account and credit card showed no activity. This also meant that Karen was in a bad state. After all, with all her necessary items still at home, she would have required cash to sustain herself. Her relatives requested the police department to search for Karen with a helicopter. But with no knowledge of the direction that Karen could have driven in, the police couldn't proceed further. The Moore family and the entire police department released missing person posters with rewards, but Karen had completely vanished without any trace. Days turned into months, and months turned into years, and Karen's family were left waiting for her to come home. Years upon years went by, but Karen did not return. Her daughter, Christina, got married and had children of her own, but there was still no information about what had happened to Karen that day. 6 January 2023 was the day when Brian Lockhart, a scuba diver and the owner of the YouTube channel Depths of History, accompanied Michael Rodriguez and Mike Sullivan, heading the Sunshine State sonar team in searching the local water bodies in Broward County. With the help of advanced sonar technology, they found a car in a retention pond in Davie. When Michael noticed his underwater sonar system lighting up, the entire team was quick to identify that they had hit the wheels of a car in the water. It took them about 15 minutes to finally find the car. When Britton dove to examine it, he found an open trunk and a license plate under 3 feet of muck. They knew they had found something substantial, but they were not sure about its details and whether it was related to any old cases. Britton quickly rushed to contact the Davie Police Department. Even 22 years after Karen's strange disappearance, Davie police hadn't forgotten about her. When they arrived at the scene the next day, they had to send the divers back into the water. The car was pulled out of the water and was sent for further inspection. The car matched the description of the vehicle Karen was driving when she disappeared. The license plate of Karen's car was found covered in dirt. It was a huge discovery in this 22-year-old case. The pieces were finally falling in place. They found 2 bones inside the car, which later confirmed that Karen Moore had been inside the car when it entered the lake. Finally, they found out what had happened to Karen Moore. Lockhart and Rodriguez could not talk about the specifics of the case even when the entire search mission was telecasted live on YouTube. The police suspected foul play and prevented the search teams and even the Moore family from giving interviews about the case. Though the details concerning what's, how's, and why's are still under investigation, a daughter finally got closure about her mother's fate after 22 years. After Karen mysteriously disappeared, Christina was left in the care of her relatives. The comfort and closeness that she felt with her mother could never be substituted. She faced constant ups and downs in her early years. She even ended up in foster care for a time. In times like these, she would miss her mother and pray that she would be found or return home to her. She said, "Every life moment that every little girl hopes and dreams for, to have their mother with them. My own birthdays, when I got engaged and married. Now I have 2 kids. They don't get to know their grandmother." Undoubtedly, Christina Babert was very close to her mother. Even after all these years, she took to TikTok in 2021, mentioning how she would have liked a little more time with her mother. After 22 long years, Christina finally got some information about her mother. Christina could not get all the answers that had bothered her for years, but she showed her gratitude to police and search teams as she finally got to bring Karen back home and lay her to rest in peace. A further probe into the case of Karen Moore's disappearance is active and ongoing. Davie police sent an email to Fox News Digital stating that they had a meeting with the detectives, but they could not comment on the case as it might hinder the possible outcome of the investigation. After the discovery of her remains in the pond, the next set of urgent questions appeared. How did Karen end up in the pond? If the police's suspicions are right, what was the motive behind this crime? Who was responsible for the 22 years of agony for Christina and the whole Moore family? Now that Karen has returned home after 22 years, all hope is not lost in her case. The dedication of the police department and the technological advancement in sonar systems resulted in a partial success. The answers may seem blurry right now, but justice for Karen may be just around the corner. If anyone out there knows anything, do not hesitate to come forward, as your information could be invaluable to unmask a decades-old mystery. 24-year-old Rita Curran was brutally murdered in her own apartment in Burlington, Vermont on 19th July, 1971. The killer left no clues, no fingerprints, and vanished into thin air. At the time, with forensic and DNA science being not as advanced as it is today, there was not much the police could do. For 52 years, the case lay cold and left investigators scratching their heads as they tried to comprehend what had happened. On 21st June 1947, Mary Eleanor Donahue Curran and Thomas F. Curran of New York City held their precious daughter for the first time and named her Rita Curran. Rita was the first child that the Curran family had welcomed. As time passed, they had 2 more children, and Rita got to welcome her 2 younger siblings. She was blessed with a loving and caring younger brother, Thomas Curran Jr., as well as a beautiful and kind younger sister, Mary Curran. The Curran family was well known and well liked in the area they resided, especially since her father Thomas was the zoning administrator for the community. Growing up, Rita was always a quiet and sweet presence, with a shy demeanor that belied her deep reserves of kindness and intelligence. She excelled academically and completed her graduation from Trinity College. She was always passionate about teaching. She completed her degree in primary education and took graduate courses at the University of Vermont. Rita lived with her family for 24 years until one day she decided to move out. It was the first time she had lived away from them, and she moved into an apartment on 17 Brooks Avenue in Burlington, Vermont, with 3 other roommates. She fulfilled her dream when she became a beloved 2nd grade teacher in Milton Elementary School. All her students loved her, and she made a lasting impact on their lives. One of her students, Jim Robar, still remembers her 5 decades later for an act of kindness she showed him when he was in the 2nd grade. While acting in a school play, he used a teddy bear as a prop, which he liked a lot, and after the play he asked Rita if he could keep it, and Rita allowed him to do so. Rita was also a talented singer and dancer, as she would often spend her time with her younger sister Mary, tap dancing and singing together. During the summer, Rita worked part-time as a chambermaid at the South Burlington Colonial Motor Inn, where she was known for her hard-working and diligent nature. She was loved by her co-workers and guests alike, who were touched by her warmth and sincerity. Can you imagine any reason for such a quiet, kind, and warm-hearted person to be killed so brutally? What could have been the reason behind her murder? On July 20th, 1971, when Beverly, one of the roommates of Rita, came back home, she had no idea that a horrifying scene was waiting for her. Beverly Lampley returned back late from a date with her boyfriend at 1 a.m. The 2 other roommates were not staying at the house that night, so it was just her and Rita. As she opened the door, she was immediately hit with the scent of iron, the unmistakable smell of blood. Her eyes adjusted to the darkness, and she saw a figure lying on the ground. As she got closer, she realized it was Rita lying partially nude, with blood all over her body. Her hair was still in curlers, and it looked like she had been preparing for bed when the attack happened. Beverly screamed out for her boyfriend, hoping he could somehow save her friend, but it was already too late. Rita was gone, her life snuffed out in a brutal and senseless act of violence. Beverly's mind raced with questions. Who could do such a thing? Why would someone hurt her dear friend? She immediately called the police as she was very scared and disheartened seeing her friend's demise. The darkness of the night was not comforting, and her mind was racing with thoughts about Rita. She had left her dear friend and roommate just a few hours ago, and Rita had been happy and excited to have the apartment all to herself. The silence of the night was deafening as Beverly and her boyfriend waited for the police to arrive. They couldn't understand why no one had heard anything, no screams, no sound of a struggle. It was like the killer had disappeared into thin air. After a short while, the police arrived at the scene and began the investigation. At first, investigators thought that Rita may have been murdered for money, but Rita's purse containing about $20 was found untouched, so it became clear that a robbery was not the motive. When investigators started to examine the whole apartment, they saw there were bloodstains in the kitchen, which indicated that the murderer could possibly have fled from there. After a thorough examination of the crime scene, the body was sent for an autopsy. The brutality of the attack was evident from the moment the chief medical examiner, Lawrence Harris, laid eyes on Rita's lifeless body. Her body was examined carefully, and they found violent bruises that covered her face and head. It was clear that she had fought for her life with everything she had, leaving behind signs of a fierce struggle. But in the end, it was the crushing grip of the killer's hands around her neck that had silenced her forever. As if the physical violence wasn't enough, the killer tried to kill her in the most brutal way possible. Her torn clothes were found discarded under her body, a cruel reminder of the heinous act that had taken place. The details of the assault were too gruesome to imagine, and it was a small comfort that she had not been sexually assaulted. Investigators swarmed the area around 17 Brooks Avenue, searching for any clues that could help solve the brutal murder of beloved teacher and chambermaid Rita Curran. The air was heavy with the weight of the unsolved crime, and residents of the town were on edge, fearful that the killer might still be lurking among them. Investigators went door to door. They also talked and interrogated the people around 17 Brooks Avenue to see if anyone might have seen or heard something out of the ordinary in the hours leading up to the discovery of Rita's body. They urged residents to think back to that fateful night and to come forward with any information that could help bring justice to the Curran family. The investigators combed through hundreds of leads, pursued every potential angle, and examined every piece of evidence they could find. Despite their best efforts, they hit a dead end. They found a single cigarette butt near Rita's lifeless arm, and they hoped it might provide some kind of a clue to her killer's identity. But at the time, DNA technology was not advanced enough to extract a profile, and the cigarette butt yielded no useful information. The killer remained a mystery, hidden in the shadows, leaving the investigators and the community puzzled. Until, one day, in 1979, FBI agent John Bassett made a chilling connection. The motel where Curran worked was right next to the infamous Elizabeth Lund Home for Unwed Mothers, the birthplace of none other than notorious serial killer Ted Bundy. As Bassett delved deeper into the case, he noticed uncanny similarities between the crime scene and those of Bundy's known victims. Bundy's modus operandi involved stalking the victims for days or weeks before assaulting them. He broke into his victims' apartments and cased their homes, learning their routines and which doors were unlocked. Rita's sister believed Ted Bundy was responsible for her sister's murder and cited some similarities to his other victims. She emphasized that all of Bundy's victims had long brown hair parted in the middle, which she believed was his motive for revenge against his ex-girlfriend. However, Bundy later stated that his victims were chosen for their youth and attractiveness and not for specific hair color or style. But after looking into the possible similarities, police found that there were details in this case that did not match Bundy's profile. Burlington Police Chief Kevin Scully stated that Bundy would attack his victims when they were asleep, strangle them with a ligature, and use a weapon to bludgeon them. However, Rita was awake and fought back and was strangled manually with fists. Bundy's crimes were usually planned and involved the use of a weapon and ligature, but Rita's murder seemed impulsive and only involved the use of hands and fists. Before Bundy's execution on January 24, 1989, he denied committing any murders in Vermont, and the Burlington police stated that they had investigated the possibility of his involvement in the Rita Curran case and concluded that Bundy was elsewhere in the country at the time. Now they were left with no other clues that could lead them to the real killer of Rita, and again, the case slowly went cold. For decades, the case of Rita Curran's brutal murder remained a mystery to investigators. But in 2014, a tiny, seemingly insignificant piece of evidence became the key that would unlock the case. It was the cigarette butt, carelessly discarded near the victim's body that had lain forgotten for years. Detectives knew that it was a long shot, but they were able to extract a DNA profile from the cigarette butt and submit it to the National Criminal Database. But unfortunately, no matches were found. It was a puzzling and frustrating dead end. But Detective Lieutenant James Trebe refused to give up. He knew that this DNA profile could be the key to unlocking the case, but he needed to think outside the box. He realized that the person who left that cigarette butt may have never had genetic material entered into the database, possibly because they had never been convicted of a felony. Detective Lieutenant James Trebe refused to let the case of Rita Curran's murder go unsolved. In 2019, he made a bold move and gathered a team of experts to review the evidence, taking a fresh approach to the decades-old case. They combed through every piece of evidence with a fine-tooth comb, determined to find the missing puzzle piece that would crack the case wide open. Trieb knew that they needed a new strategy, and they found it in genetic genealogy. They decided to use this cutting-edge technique to analyze the DNA profile found on the cigarette butt discovered at the scene of the crime. They delved deep into DNA databases, hoping to find a match for the genetic material that had eluded them for so long. Their hard work paid off when an outside expert in genetic genealogy was able to connect the DNA to relatives of a man named William DeRoos. The relative they then contacted was the half-brother of DeRoos, who was willing to give them his DNA sample, and his DNA helped to finally conclude with certainty that DeRoos was the one who left behind the cigarette butt found at the scene of the crime. When police looked into DeRoos's whereabouts at the time of the murder, they found he was living 2 floors above Rita's apartment at 17 Brooks Avenue. With this breakthrough, they finally had the key to unlock the mystery of Rita Curran's murder. The investigation proceeded, and investigators now found additional DNA evidence on Curran's ripped housecoat that matched the DNA on the cigarette butt found near her body. This discovery strengthened the case against DeRoos as it linked him to the crime scene in a more concrete manner. They then looked into his past and found out that William DeRoos was married to Michelle in the summer of 1971 in Burlington, just about 2 weeks before the murder. They were newlyweds who were living in the same building, just 2 floors above Rita Curran when she was brutally murdered in 1971. Furthermore, investigators were able to re-interview DeRoos's then-wife, who had previously lied about his alibi when they had interviewed her during the initial investigation, and she admitted to her falsehood. She told them that she had been threatened by DeRoos to say that they were together on the night of the murder, but the truth was that they had had an argument and DeRoos went outside for a walk to try and cool down. She had no idea about what happened when DeRoos was gone. Her admission was a key factor in the investigation, as it helped to establish DeRoos's guilt beyond any reasonable doubt. She also told them that shortly after the crime, DeRoos had left her and moved to Thailand to become a monk. 3 years later, he resurfaced in San Francisco, where he met his second wife, Sarah Hepting. Detectives contacted Sarah, his second wife, as well, and asked her about DeRoos. Sarah's account of DeRoos was chilling. She told Burlington police that he once stabbed a woman right in front of her, but luckily she survived the attack. In addition, she revealed that he had tried to strangle her in the same manner that Curran was killed. All of this, along with evidence found against him and the confession of his first wife, was enough for the police to be sure that they had their culprit. But sadly, despite the victory in solving the case, the day was bittersweet for the police, as when they looked into DeRoos, they learned that he had already died of a drug overdose in 1986. The news of the breakthrough in Rita Curran's murder case sent shockwaves through the community, bringing a mix of emotions for those who knew her and those who had only heard of her through stories. For Mary Campbell, Curran's sister, the case had haunted her family for generations. "We now have 2 generations in our family who never knew her," she said with a heavy heart. But through the tears and the pain, there was a glimmer of hope. Thomas Curran, Rita's brother, found solace in the support of his loved ones. "I pray to my parents and I pray to Rita. My wife Nancy tells me we will get through this. We are Curran strong," he said, and his voice was filled with determination. As news of the arrest spread, messages of praise and gratitude poured in from all corners. Former Burlington Police Chief Brandon Del Pozo, who had worked on the case, expressed his admiration for the hard-working detectives who never gave up. "This is one of those cases where I regretted that I couldn't find the killer. But I'm so proud of the Burlington Police Department," he said, and his voice was filled with pride. Jim Robar, the former student of Curran's, spoke as well, saying, "She was beautiful from the inside out. She told me that I could keep the teddy bear, and I still have the teddy bear. I just can't find it," he said with a heavy heart. Robar's sentiment was echoed by many in the community who remembered Curran as a dedicated teacher who had a passion for education and helping others learn. Her legacy will continue to live on in the hearts and minds of those who knew her and those who only know her through the stories that have been passed down through generations. On February 27, 2011, a murder took place in Hyannis, a village that is located on the southern coast of Cape Cod, Massachusetts. 31-year-old Todd Lampley was shot dead through the window of his room. Some shocking evidence that was found at the crime scene connected some fictional stories to the murder. But despite this confusing evidence, it took 12 years to reveal the truth behind Todd's murder. Nestled on the southern coast of Cape Cod, Massachusetts, is Hyannis, a picturesque city. It is a charming gem that sparkles with history, natural beauty, and endless activities. The village is surrounded by the serene waters of the Nantucket Sound, which provides stunning views of the sunset and plenty of opportunities for water sports enthusiasts. The quaint main street of Hyannis is dotted with colorful boutiques, art galleries, and restaurants that offer mouth-watering local seafood. For history buffs, the John F. Kennedy Hyannis Museum showcases the life and times of the 35th President of the United States, who loved spending summers in Hyannis. In addition to its cultural offerings, Hyannis boasts pristine beaches that offer a relaxing respite from the hustle and bustle of everyday life. This is where our case begins today. The night was quiet and peaceful on February 27, 2011, with a gentle breeze blowing through the streets of Hyannis, Massachusetts. But little did anyone know that a heinous crime was about to shatter the tranquility of the neighborhood. Todd Lampley, a young father and a beloved member of the community, was about to meet his untimely demise. As the night wore on, a concerned neighbor went to check on Todd. But as he approached Todd's house, he noticed something was off. The door was locked from the inside. The neighbor's suspicions were raised, and he quickly contacted the authorities. When they arrived, what they found was a scene of horror. Todd Lampley, only 31 years old, lay lifeless in his bedroom with a gunshot wound that had come through his window. The whole of Hyannis was in shock. How could such a thing happen in their peaceful community? The investigation that followed would uncover secrets, lies, and unexpected twists that would leave everyone reeling. The investigators arrived at the address provided by Todd's neighbor, their hearts racing with anticipation and fear. They could only imagine the worst-case scenario, but nothing could have prepared them for what they saw. Todd's lifeless body lay on the floor, and blood was splattered all over the room. It was a gruesome sight. As they examined the crime scene, the investigators' shock turned into curiosity as they began to uncover the evidence. 3 shell casings and a black cell phone were found at the crime scene. It was obvious that Todd was mercilessly gunned down from the outside of his window. The investigators were left puzzled and with hundreds of questions racing through their minds. They combed the area around Todd's house, determined to uncover any clues that could lead them to the killer. No stone was left unturned, no lead left unexplored. The investigators knew that the key to solving the case lay in the details. So they went door to door, interviewing every resident in the area, looking for anyone who had heard or seen anything out of the ordinary on the night of the murders. They listened intently as people shared their stories, piecing together a timeline of events that would help them solve the case. The murder of Todd Lampley took a bizarre turn when investigators discovered an unlikely object at the crime scene. It was a sweet potato, which appeared to have been used as a silencer, muffling the sound of the gunshots. It was as if the perpetrator was taking inspiration from a hit HBO series, The Wire. In the gritty urban landscape of The Wire, a tragic scene unfolds in Season 1 as a woman is ruthlessly gunned down in her own home. The shooter, lurking outside her window in the darkness, taps on the glass to lure her closer before unleashing a fatal shot. This chilling scene echoes the real-life murder of Todd Lampley, who was also shot through his bedroom window on a fateful night in Hyannis, Massachusetts. But that's not the only way the HBO show influenced the murder. Apparently, in season 4 of the same show, one of the fictional police investigators solves a murder in which the shooter used a potato as a makeshift silencer when fatally shooting his victim. The similarities between this tragedy and the world of The Wire are eerie and haunting, a testament to the show's unflinching portrayal of life on the streets where a similar trick was used to mask a gunshot. The potato was carefully carved to create a hole in the center and placed over the barrel of a gun, muffling the sound of the shots that killed Lampley. To add to the intrigue, the cell phone found at the scene of the shooting was registered under the name of one of the show's characters, Marlo Stanfield. The connection between the show and the crime scene was puzzling to say the least. Investigators sent the sweet potato for testing, discovered DNA evidence on it as a crucial clue that could lead them to the killer. However, it would be years before investigators could connect someone with this DNA. But even then, investigators had another trail to follow. A handgun, believed to be the murder weapon, was later found to have been tossed in a nearby lake. It was later fished out by civilians and was then retrieved by the police. Luckily, detectives had another lead in their investigation at this point. DeVaris Hampton, a man with a troubled past and a prolonged criminal record, was wearing a GPS monitoring bracelet around the killing as part of his probation in an unrelated case. Location data on Hampton's GPS monitoring bracelet placed him at the exact location where the gun was thrown into the lake. Phone records revealed that Hampton had exchanged a flurry of calls and texts with a man who was present in Lampley's house at the time of the murder. But the biggest link was yet to be revealed. Detectives discovered that the suspect, DeVaris Hampton, had a previous connection with the victim, Todd Lampley. Hampton testified in court that Lampley was involved in the July 2007 murder of Jacques Sellers in the same neighborhood. Interestingly, Jacques was also murdered in the same manner, a gunshot through the window. It's as if Hampton was leaving a trail of breadcrumbs for investigators to follow. With every lead pointing to him, it was only a matter of time before justice was served. The web of lies and deception that Hampton had spun around himself was slowly unraveling. Yet he remained tight-lipped and refused to answer anything about the Todd Lampley case during questioning after getting arrested in an unrelated case just a few days after the shooting. It was a frustrating roadblock, but the investigators didn't give up. They were determined to get to the bottom of the case, no matter what it took. Years of painstaking work finally paid off when DNA evidence connected the murder to Hampton. In 2016, authorities obtained a DNA swab from Hampton without his knowledge by collecting some of his phlegm that he spit into a puddle. When the results came back, they were conclusive. The DNA on the sweet potato matched that of Hampton's spit. It was a breakthrough moment in the case. The puzzle was finally coming together. But despite this damning evidence, it still took 7 years to finally apprehend DeVaris Hampton. On February 24, 2023, now 40-year-old Hampton was taken into custody and charged with 1 count each of murder and assault and battery with a dangerous weapon for the fatal shooting of 31-year-old Todd Lampley. Authorities, however, declined to comment on what caused the delay. In a courtroom filled with tension and uncertainty, Hampton made his first appearance before a judge in Barnstable District Court on February 27, 2023, exactly 12 years after the fatal shooting. With a stern expression on his face, he firmly declared his innocence by pleading not guilty to the charges against him. Despite the gravity of the situation, Hampton remained composed and resolute, knowing that the legal battle ahead of him would be a long and arduous one. The courtroom fell silent as the judge set his next court date for April 5, 2023. The case of Todd Lampley's murder might have come to a conclusion and the suspect has been identified, but the investigation is far from finished. Assistant District Attorney Russell Enos has remained tight-lipped about the delay in the case, only stating that the evidence has been assessed. Meanwhile, Hampton's court-appointed attorney, Edward Fogarty, has promised a vigorous defense and expressed confidence in his client's innocence. The investigation into Todd Lampley's death was a long and burdensome process, but ultimately it is one step closer to justice. The use of a sweet potato as a silencer in the case is a reminder of the creativity that criminals can use to commit heinous acts. We hope that this video has shed some light on the dedication and hard work that law enforcement officers put into solving crimes and bringing perpetrators to justice. Please don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel for more true crime stories and updates on ongoing cases. Thank you again for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.